Welcome back to the School Transportation Nation podcast. It's brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing, and by Zoom, the leader in modernizing student transportation. Ryan Gray here, Editor-in-Chief, STN, back at you, joined by our Senior Editor Extraordinaire, Taylor Ekbatani. Taylor, how's it going?
Hello. Yeah, great to be on. I love sharing another week on the podcast with you.
Absolutely. And a little bit later, you're going to be sitting down with Wayne Reese. He's the Transportation and Logistics Administrator for Cache County and Logan City School District in Utah. And a little bit later, I'll be talking with Jim Ellis. He's the Director of People Transportation for Henrico County Public Schools in Virginia. Here we are at the end of February. Black History Month is coming to a close. Love the Bus Month is coming to a close. So, Taylor, we had some pounding the pavement out there talking to folks about getting some word and photos from different celebrations that were held throughout the month of February. We have March coming out here in a matter of a day or so. So be sure to check that out on stnonline.com. We've got a packed episode today, so we want to get to our guests very soon. But first, Taylor, need to talk about this. A tragedy has unfolded in Texas, Livingston, Texas, which is just north of Houston. A lot of you folks have been following this case. Audrey Cunningham was a little girl. Her body was found last week. She was apparently on her way to the school bus stop on February 15th, never made it. And never made it to school. A search began, and unfortunately, they did find her body in a river. Very sad, and it's come to light that it was evidently a friend of her father's who has been arrested and charged with her murder. Lived on the property, and the parents entrusted this man to walk their daughter to the school bus stop. Again, she never made it. Just a really sad state of affairs.
Yeah, Ryan, that it's really sad to read too. I mean, 11-year-old girl, it's, worst thing you could possibly think of for a parent.
Exactly. And, when these things happen tragically, it always leads me to start thinking about training, and I think that everyone in the nation thinks immediately about that. Now, there was no indications that little Audrey even got close to the school bus stop, and I'm not sure exactly how far away it was from her house, but the reports I've read did say that this man was going to walk her down the street. So there's no indication that, anybody ever saw what happened. But it requires us to look at, the training that drivers get to see something, say something, right? It opens up that conversation one more time, again, tragically. We have the first observer training that the Transportation Safety Administration has done for years. There's, been, I think, a couple 100,000 school bus drivers trained on that nationwide. We have Busing on the Lookout, which is that program that originated out of Truckers Against Trafficking. That group that really looks at how truck drivers and bus drivers can be engaged and be on the lookout for sex trafficking. Sex trafficking is not like what we see in the movies, where people are being absconded and they're being taken to Europe and forced into slavery. There's some everyday occurrences that happen, and where children are groomed, and sometimes it's by their parents, sometimes it's by friends of their parents, it just, relatives. And that's often, it's the person that the child knows that's often the most dangerous, and here we saw what happened with Audrey. And, I know that I spoke with Marissa Weisinger, who's the executive secretary of the Texas Association for People Transportation. And, one of the things that they do with their trainer academy is they talk about student management. And one of those aspects is that school bus drivers getting to know their students, talking with them, greeting them every day. And we hear that across the industry. School bus drivers, they're the first and oftentimes the last adult, or at least, representative of the school district that these children see every day. and they can develop a relationship with them so that they can see signs if suddenly the student acts differently or is dressed differently. Ask questions, find out what's going on with that student, because you never know, it could be literally the difference between life and death. So it's really sad, again, to see these headlines. And unfortunately, it's the world we live in. It's not just, it's not acceptable. And that's what, as an industry, what can this industry do to try to impact things positively? Speaking of tragedies, unfortunately, Taylor, we've also seen a rise recently in fatalities around school buses.
Yeah, and I know we talked about the Florida student a couple episodes ago, but we just had a 5-year-old girl who was reportedly struck and killed by a school bus moments after the driver dropped her off near her home in New York City. So, a really unfortunate tragedy once again. On February 1st, there was another 8-year-old boy who was struck and killed by a school bus in the same Rockland County area in New York. So, 2 tragedies the same month. Devastating, Brian.
Absolutely. Well, our hearts go out to all of those who have been impacted by these tragedies, and again, to our industry friends and partners, training. That's what is always, first and foremost, the need to just continue doing the great job and just identify those areas where we can do even better.
Mm-hmm. And I have a great conversation with Wayne a little bit later about that, where we kind of dive into training students on loading and unloading.
Yep.
So stay tuned.
Yeah, we'll get to your interview, Taylor, with Wayne in just a minute. But first, here's a message from TransFinder.
After a 5-year hiatus, TransFinder's annual client summit is returning with a vengeance. The 3-day conference runs from April 28th to May 1st in San Antonio, Texas, and includes a visit to the Alamo, too. The event is jam-packed with interactive classes on all TransFinder's award-winning solutions like Route Finder, Stop Finder, Wayfinder, and Service Finder. There's even a class inside a bus. But there's a hitch, guys. You have to be a TransFinder client to attend. But here's the good news. There's still time to become a TransFinder client before their user summit. Just email them at marketing@transfinder.com and put STN in the subject line, and that'll help you get started. Don't miss TransFinder's annual client summit this spring in San Antonio, Texas. It will be the best one yet, no doubt about it.
All right, nation. So I am here with another awesome podcast guest. I'm excited to bring Wayne Reese, the Transportation and Logistics Administrator for Cache County and Logan City School Districts, to the stage. Welcome, Wayne. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be with you.
So I talked to Wayne for the February issue of STN. So if you guys haven't checked that out, definitely give it a read. But we talk about danger zone, loading and unloading safety, which is super important in light of everything that's been going on. And we'll jump into that a little bit later, Wayne. But I was hoping you could start by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in the industry.
Well, I was raised on a dairy farm in a small community of about 500. And so I grew up working from sunup till sundown, milking cows, hauling hay, moving sprinkler pipe. And when we weren't working on the farm, my brother and I were down in the river bottoms, swimming across the ponds with our horses, and just had a hardworking but a very safe childhood that I just thoroughly enjoyed. So growing up, I had good people around me, and I had was serving in an appointment with a good friend of mine. And one day that good friend, who also had a dairy farm, was driving a school bus. He came to me and he said, "Hey, Wayne," he said, "we really need help. Can you come and help us?" And so I asked him what it would entail, and he said these would be the hours. And I thought, well, I can do that in addition to working on my dairy farm. So he said, call my boss. So I called him, and he had me come in, and they had me drive around the block, and I didn't hit anything. So it was before the days of the commercial driver's license. So I didn't hit anything. So they gave me the keys and said, hey, go take those kids to school, would you please? So that's how I got started in the industry. And the school bus back then was much different than it is now. It didn't have stop signs on the side, didn't have crossing mirrors to help drivers see students as they're crossing. It didn't have the camera systems and the collision mitigation systems. You basically had a metal post with a pad on it for the driver to sit on, and then the seats that the students sat on, the backs were fiberglass. It was before the increased use of compartmentalization came in, and so we didn't have to replace the seat backs very often. They were really hard, but I don't think they would help in an accident. So that's how I got my start. I started in '85, and then in '93 they asked me to come into the office to be a supervisor, and so I did that. In '94 they asked me to sell my cows and to quit being a dairy farmer and come to lead the department. So this year I'll have been leading our department now for 30 years, and I've thoroughly loved it. What a wonderful profession, and what great people to work with.
Wow.
So that's how I got started.
Yeah. So same district then for all 30 years.
Yes, for 39 years now.
Wow. That's impressive. Congratulations.
So I do have gray hair, but I have some of my faculty still. I can still think a little. So, but yeah, it's been a great profession. Thoroughly love our bus drivers and the kids we transport. It's just a very rewarding profession to be involved in.
Mm-hmm. How was that transition from, being a dairy farmer to now leading the department? You herding cows?
Yeah, you know what? When you're a dairy farmer and the cow comes in and you're going to milk the cow, if the cow gets anxious and they try to kick you, you can put a kicker on it. When parents come in, if they're not real happy, you can't put a kicker on them. You exercise a lot of patience and you listen and help them resolve their concerns. So, yeah, it's a little different. You can't use the hot shot on them to get them moving. It's a whole different ballgame. But you know what? By and large, it's very rewarding, though. Thoroughly loved it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I don't know if I said it in the beginning, but you are based in Utah. So can you provide a little bit of details? Because you're 2 school districts. So you do the transportation for Cache County and Logan City. So can you kind of talk about that and what that kind of entails?
Sure. So we are we're right on the Utah-Idaho border. We're the most north county, Cache County. And within Cache County, there are a lot of smaller communities, and the largest community in the county is Logan City, and it's the county seat. So prior to 1997, Cache, we had our own busing system. And when I started, we had about 50 school buses. And Logan had their own school buses. They were using a private carrier at the time. And then in 1997, they contacted me and asked me if I would be willing to consider integrating the 2 school bus systems into one. And so each of the school districts contributed the resources to this joint venture, great partnership. And so by sharing those resources, we were able to reduce the number of school buses operating in the valley by 20, while still providing the same service to the same number of students as we were before. And so it's been a good partnership for both school districts.
Okay, wow. I see here that you are also the first district in Utah to install GPS technology, so that's exciting.
We did that. That was just an emerging technology, and we've tried to always be. For example, when the federal motor carriers come out requiring stop signs on buses, we didn't just put it on our new buses. We retrofitted all of our old school buses with stop signs. Same with the crossover mirrors. And so with this new technology of global positioning systems, we could see the safety benefits from that. And so we jumped on that really early, and we have just been happy that we have. It's been a great thing. We've tried to be forward thinking in our approach to grants. We operate diesel and propane powered school buses, and the last several years we brought in about $4 billion in grant funds to help us replace some of our aging buses. And so now between the two school districts, we operate 155 school buses. We transport 12,000 students to and from school each day and serve 41 schools, as well as 7 charter schools that we provide field trips to. And we have 3 new schools under construction. So our valley is growing. And
yeah, wow.
So we keep increasing.
That's a big jump, starting at 50 school buses when you first started to now 155.
Yes. Yeah, it is.
Okay. So jumping back into the February issue, we talked a lot about loading and unloading safety. And then I was writing that article and 2 tragic fatalities actually occurred. A Georgia student was killed due to illegal passing, and another Florida student was ran over by their bus after going back to get a ball that they had dropped. And then just last week, I saw that a 5-year-old was struck and killed by a school bus. So not many details are released on that at this time, but training from your perspective, why is training students so important? We see illegal passing. We see drivers hitting students after getting off the bus. What can students do to protect themselves as well?
Yeah. So we had an incident this morning on one of our school buses in the fog. We have a real challenge with fog on occasion here in the valley, especially in the lower parts of the valley. And we had a school bus that had gone through a dip. There's a river that goes through. So you had that moisture from the river come up the other side, had a bus stop on the top of the hill, and it was foggy. So I had 2 buses actually stopped there, one behind the other one. Both had their stop signs out, their lights going. And the driver is just getting ready. She's got her hand up as she's signaling the students to wait for her signal, letting them know to stay. And all of a sudden, here comes a car. Our driver anticipates was at least 50, 55 miles an hour running through those red lights of the bus. If those students hadn't been trained and following that training, it could have been a tragedy. And so our bus driver, her name is Debbie Cooper. I can't sing her praises enough for training her kids to make sure that they cross safely. Mm-hmm. So, and we've also developed a pamphlet. I sent you a copy of this pamphlet. We believe that we need to get parents involved in their children's safety. So the pamphlet is something that we give to every student to take home and discuss with their parents every year, talking about not just crossing safely, but how to walk to the bus stop safely, how to ride the bus safely. So we try to get parents involved. The bus drivers do their training with the students, intensive training to teach them about safe crossing. And the main thing is when you've worked with children for a long time, you can never quit reminding and reteaching and encouraging, because in my opinion, it's an every stop teaching opportunity where we just have to remind children to be safe, to watch for the signals. We put our drivers, our coaching team, rather than driver trainers. I have a transportation coaching team, just like in sports. I've got coaches who, part of my coaching team, are responsible for sped busing, for driver development, or for driver recruitment, or for driver support, driver reviews. And then that coaching team are my safety team. They look at a broader array of things. They put together a video and an online module that we require our drivers to complete successfully every year as part of the training on making sure that we're uniform in our hand signals and in our teaching our children how to cross safely. So that's another one of the things that we do with our drivers. We've also this year listed 6 basic safety steps that I think are foundational to a school bus driver having a safe day. And that is, are the students trained and crossing safely? Are the students seated properly? Are our drivers not using cell phones or electronic devices? If our drivers are having a difficulty with student management, are they contacting our coaches? Are drivers checking their bus to make sure it's empty after each run? And then left-hand turns. State risk management tells us that one of the most dangerous turns that a state vehicle can make, both in terms of cost and in terms of injury, is a left-hand turn if you turn in front of somebody. And so we really focus on that. So I took those 6 steps. I sent them out to our drivers, and I asked them to come up with some acronyms that might help us remember those 6 steps. And so they've sent their acronyms in, and then my technology specialist is putting all those acronyms together in a format, sending it out to the drivers. They're going to vote on their favorite, and whatever driver comes up with the acronym that everybody likes the best is going to get a $500 stipend for their effort. So for me, it's a way to get our drivers involved in these safety steps. They're looking at them and can be part of the solution. So we're excited about it.
Oh, wow. That's a really cool incentive. Do you have an acronym on the top of your head that you can share with us really quick?
Oh, we've got everything from Kit Kat to safety to shield to there's just a lot of them. And the drivers have been very creative. So I'm excited to see what comes out of it.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I know you were talking about the pamphlet. It talks about the hand signals and then just some safety recommendations for the parents, motorists. I think it's a great pamphlet that you guys have put together. The
safety zone for students as they're waiting for the bus, making sure that they're waiting 10 feet off the road or 12 feet off the road and so forth. Yeah, It's a great pamphlet.
Awesome. Yeah, I know that, training students is definitely one of the biggest elements of loading and unloading zone safety. We have a poll at stnonline.com right now that asks, what would increase danger zone safety the most? And student training is leading the way right now. So that's above, technology, community training. It's student training.
And I agree with that. I think that's the number one thing. However, I also think we can add to that, not replace it, nothing instead of that. That's paramount. But for example, we had a bus stop that was on a street that every day somebody would run the red loading lights. We contacted the police. They came, they wrote tickets out. It was just an everyday occurrence. And so even though those students were safe crossing trained, we didn't have any injuries there, which we're grateful for. But as we looked at that, we thought, well, okay, can we make it safer for those students? So I went and contacted the apartment manager of a big apartment complex that's there and asked him if we could move the bus stop in his parking lot. And so we moved the bus stop in his parking lot. That's where all the students were coming from, is that apartment complex. Moved it in there, and we haven't had anybody run red loading lights in the parking lot. So it's been wonderful. So that we can do. We also sometimes have changed and just had a right side pickup and drop off on there. So it's not instead of the student management, but I think if we just focus on that there's only one thing, I think we can miss some other opportunities to help as well. Another thing that we started this year that I am just really grateful for, it comes from the National Transportation Safety Board. One of their priorities is that all commercial fleets, that when you have the video recording equipment on your vehicle, you need to be reviewing that because oftentimes in their crash analysis, they find that there was a history of safety violations prior to the crash. And so if you're watching those videos, perhaps you can prevent that. And so we have started that this year, and we're picking up little things that we hope, number one, will help kids stay safe, but it also supports our drivers in helping with reminders, so that we're helping them be safe. There isn't there's no school bus driver on the road who wants a student to be hurt. And so with these video reviews, we can see things and we got, you know what? Let's help this driver with this. Let's help them improve. Maybe they've got a question. Maybe they're not understanding something. So we do that. We've got the dash cam for the red light runners. I'm a big believer on the collision mitigation systems on school buses. It frustrates me that every manufacturer doesn't automatically offer it like you see most car and automobile manufacturers, because that adaptive cruise control, the lane departure, the stopping the vehicle are some of those things that National Transportation Safety Board has found would prevent further injury and some fatalities if the school buses would have been equipped with some of that collision mitigation. So, student training is number one. That is the number one. But I don't think we should stop there. I think we should add to that to support that student training.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I know you mentioned the video review, and we talked about it in the article as well. It's not a way to be like, oh, I caught you doing something wrong, driver. Yeah. It's a way to say, hey, we noticed this. This is how you can improve.
Right. Yes. So our coaches review that. Then they take that out with a laptop and they let the driver review it with them. So they help the driver see what's going on, and maybe it's something that our coach doesn't know that's going on that the driver can explain, or maybe it's something that our driver doesn't understand. So the coach is able to demonstrate this is how we should properly do it. And I'm a big believer. We just started it this year, but I'm already a big believer that we need to continue doing that, because it will really help drivers do an even better job than they do. And they already do a great job.
And you guys also have parent apps and routing software, correct?
We do. We have the parent apps that the parents can see where their child's bus is on the route at any time. And that's very popular. We've, about the time we put GPS on our buses, we purchased routing software, and we've used that. I'll be honest with you, the first one we purchased it took more effort to put the information in than anything we got out of it. But routing software has really become much more useful than it used to be. And we're using routing software. We have tablets on our buses. And now we're just in the stage of trying to get our routing software married up with that tablet so that the turn-by-turn directions can be displayed on the tablet, especially when you have a substitute driver. So the substitute driver's getting directions from that tablet of where to go, so that when they're stopped loading, the substitute driver can focus on that student training, making sure they're focused on that rather than where's my next bus stop. So that's next on our list to try and get that working.
Yeah, that's exciting. Well, I think I've stolen enough of your time, Wayne. Thanks so much for jumping on the podcast, and I really appreciate this discussion that we had.
No, thank you for all you do for the industry of school bus and to promote safety. So thank you, Taylor. Thank you, Claudia.
All right. Thanks, Taylor and Wayne. Great conversation. Now let's grab a word from Zoom.
This message is brought to you by Zoom, the leader in modernizing student transportation. Are you tired of the status quo and the same outdated school transportation outcomes? School districts nationwide, including Los Angeles, San Francisco, Oakland, Seattle, Howard County, Maryland, and Reading, Pennsylvania, have chosen a new school transportation provider, Zoom. Zoom has transformed the yellow school bus experience, bringing world-class technology and operations that the industry has never had access to before. School districts are gravitating to Zoom for their turnkey approach that leads to unprecedented outcomes, including optimized routes, reduced commute times, the ability to track kids to and from school on the bus, and improved communication via an app connecting parents, drivers, and school administrators, all the while saving significant dollars that the school district can put back in the classroom. The future of student transportation is here. To learn more, visit Zoom at www.ridezum.com. That's www.ridezum.com to learn more.
All right, I want to welcome to the School Transportation Nation podcast stage a good friend of STN and myself, Jim Ellis, Director of Transportation for Henrico Public Schools in Virginia.
Hey, how you doing? Don't want to get too many people upset, but it's pronounced Henrico.
Henrico. I stand corrected. I'm sorry. I've been saying it wrong all these years. We talk about it in the STN editorial room, and Henrico. Okay. So Jim, thanks for joining us. Like I mentioned, a good friend of STN's. You're a frequent attendee in Reno, and I know we're talking this year about maybe getting you to Indianapolis. But Jim, real quickly, for those out there in the nation who don't know you, tell them a little bit about yourself. I understand that you have been in this industry for 42 years or so.
Yeah, somewhere about that. I started off as a high school bus driver in North Carolina a few years back when they allowed 16-year-olds to drive the school bus. Mm-hmm. So I drove in high school. I drove in college. That got me in my foot in the door for where I started teaching with Chapel Hill Caldwell City Schools in North Carolina. I got wrangled back into transportation. So I became the director there. Then I moved up to Loudoun County in Virginia, put in some time there. And then I've moved back to the Richmond area for Henrico County, and I've been the director there now for the last coming up on 4 years now.
Yeah, almost 4 years since like May 2020. So that was interesting. So you transitioned from Loudoun over to Henrico right in the middle of the all hell breaking loose with COVID.
It certainly was, and I was a little worried that moving, selling my house, all those things, but I think it turned out to be a blessing because I saw. I could evaluate the system of what they were doing, what they have done. And in many cases, when people change jobs, the job isn't stopped. So everything was at a full stop. You could see things. I was able to talk with the staff a little more longer, put in more time with them to see exactly what we needed to do, where we were going, as opposed to everything still running at a rampant pace around you. Everything was stopped. So I think that it was a blessing that I was able to get in when it was stopped. And make a reassessment on what we needed to do and where we were going forward once we came out of COVID.
And in terms of where you've been and where you're going, back to your experience, breadth of experience in the industry, we were talking a little bit before we started recording about a project you're working on right now where you're looking at what Henrico needs to do going forward. And we were talking about people. We were talking about, technology, moving from paper to online systems. Give us a little bit of perspective from your standpoint, how you view the industry back when you first started and kind of to where it is now. Obviously a lot of innovation there that's been driving this. Sometimes it's a little bit of the tail wagging the dog on it. But give us your perspective on you personally as well as Henrico, what the path forward looks like.
Well, I know that we're certainly working on a couple of things to make drivers' lives a lot easier. I know that at one point, being a driver, all the things that I hated to do are things that I certainly want them to make it easier on. And one of the things that, drivers always, they want to get paid. They don't always necessarily want to turn that timesheet in on time. And chasing the paper trail has always been an issue, especially, when you're got a size, 600 buses and employees. Paper timesheets are, they're out. And there's always going to be somebody that didn't get their pay in and things like that. And that's always a consternation with them. So if we can, improve that situation, number one, we're getting away from paper. But of course, now we've got to get it, to start, we've got to have some kind of electronic means of doing it. So this year we've brought in the tablets. We've got tablets on our buses. And I think the biggest thing to do it is you just don't throw it on there and give them all the things that we have that it can offer. So we've decided to take baby steps with it. The first month, just make sure you turn the tablet on every day. From there, then you can start looking at when students get on, you can see the kids, they're populate when you get to the stops. Start looking at that, because now we've started to where students are being tracked at about half of our elementary schools now. As they get on the bus, they've got a tag, an RFID tag, and they scan on and off the bus. Now the kids' names and everything. Now you don't have to learn them, just by seeing them every day. You can put a face with the name as soon as they get on the bus. So that's making it a little easier for them as well, being able to give them directions for those that are our sub drivers. It helps them, as opposed to having them have a stack full of route sheets with them to look at. It's easier, to make sure that you just plug in that run and go from there. And of course, it's not perfect, but it's certainly a step up from where we were with the paper and everything. So, those are the things that, we're looking at. And, then our next step here will be being able to see your timesheet on the tablet. Our bus incidences, that's another paper thing where we've just transitioned from paper bus incident forms when students are not showing their best behavior on the bus. It was a paper form. It go from the driver to the zone office to the school, and it might get back to us or it might not, and it usually doesn't. So now we've got an electronic means to keep up with that. And so that's one more step that, the drivers, instead of filling out that paper sheet, they can fill it out on the tablet, so that it gets to where it needs to be a lot quicker. And we can also keep the schools accountable, for all those lost, behavior forms. We can keep a tabulation of them and how long it takes them to get them back, and, what behaviors are occurring the most, all those things that, that I know drivers get frustrated with when, Johnny hits Sally and nothing happens, and Johnny hits Mike and nothing happens. And where are we? So I know that's, drivers, that they're concerned that nothing ever happens to some students in their behaviors. And I think that being able to address that and get some timely information back to them helps them a lot, because it's not necessarily what you do. It's just that you were able to talk to somebody, or the situation was managed somewhere along the line.
Absolutely. And it's safety, so on from the standpoint of paper, right? You don't want your drivers, fussing with a paper route sheet when they're supposed to be driving, with everything that we know about, defensive driving and no distractions. And the same thing with the kids on the buses with the incidents you're talking about. You want something that technology makes their job easier, or it takes some of that burden off them. Because again, as a driver, you probably lived through this, where you're, how hard is it when you're trying to drive a big bus and you got 60 kids behind you and you have a route sheet that you're trying to flip through, or you're trying to write down an incident report.
Right. Yeah. I know that one of the things that I try to talk with the school administrators is, every time that we look up, we might as well be texting while we're driving, because our eyes are off the road. And every time something happens, in the back, our eyes automatically look up to see what's going on. And when you're in these urban areas and things like that, you can be out in the rural areas, animals jump in front of you all the time. But every time our eyes are off the road, we're not focused on what we're really doing. Yeah. And I just see that that's always an unsafe situation.
Yeah. It's a culture thing too, isn't it? From a standpoint of safety, but then also in the positive culture, like you were alluding to, where the drivers are their needs are being addressed. they're being heard. And one of the things that we're tracking a lot right now is just the general dissatisfaction, it seems, of the job of driving a school bus, where these drivers are physically being attacked by parents, by kids. We had last year, there was a very well publicized incident out of the Cleveland area where a school bus driver finally snapped and went off on the kids. And of course, all the kids have cell phones and they're filming, this tirade. How much from a culture standpoint, because I know that's very important for you, some of our previous conversations we've had over the years about affecting that culture on your team. How do you address, aside from some of this technology that you mentioned, how do you address that culture where you as the leader are saying, hey, I'm a former driver. Perhaps maybe you drive some too, with the driver shortage.
I drive every day.
So how do you move that needle? How do is it professional development? Is it just a matter of making sure that their concerns are being heard, that you are engaging the principals, the administration within your district so that they're, walking the talk?
Yep. One of the things that came out of our electronic means of keeping up with the student conduct came from, direct conversations with our drivers, with the school board about, we don't think anything's being addressed. And you want to know why drivers are leaving and upset. It's because our needs aren't being met as far as school discipline on the bus. And so we this summer we revamped the entire bus code of conduct for buses. So it's laid out there for, if you do this, if you do A, this is the result, or this is the consequence, and so forth. And so the drivers were heard. They felt that they were heard. And yes, it's not perfect yet, but it's come a long way from last year as far as things being addressed on the buses. So they did hear them, and changes have been made as far as that bus conduct on the school bus goes, because that, again, that was one of the big things. Managing other people's kids isn't the same as it was 30 years ago. Like I said, when I was a 16-year-old driver driving with 17 and 18-year-old people that were older than me on my bus, I mean, it was a different time. I can't think of any 16-year-old now that I would put in charge of that I was, but it was a different time. And today's students are not the same students of 30 years ago, where because I said so was good enough. Everybody wants to know why. It's not good enough anymore. You've got to give them an answer, and that's one of the things. But I know that my drivers were heard. We made that adjustment, and I think that it's for the positive in that direction, that student behavior on the buses is being addressed a lot more than it was last year.
Is it also an equity issue? One of the buzzwords or acronyms right now is DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. How much does that play into it? Being a leader in the student transportation industry, great breadth of career, and you happen to be a Black man in America. I want to get your thoughts on DEI and what that really means in terms of both your employees and the students you serve. Because as you were mentioning, the students are different and things are just different today than they were maybe 30 years ago. Unfortunately, a lot of stuff hasn't changed. But the students are different. Your employees are different. The parents are different.
Right.
So as a leader, how do you wrap your head around all that, and what does DEI mean to you and in your operation?
Well, first off, I know that, and then probably in a lot of cases, my staff is pretty diverse. We've got every walk of life, driving the school bus, and we've got a heavy population of people that are ESL learners, and they are, in our community, and it's becoming greater. I know that I had just seen a thing where we're increasing our ESL program because more students that English isn't their first language are here, and we're trying to address that. And I certainly know that we, as far as being diverse and being culturally aware of other people's ideals and beliefs and procedures, it's not always going to be our own, but we've got to be, cognizant of how they feel and them coming to another country and not knowing, exactly what to say or what to do, or our customs of what we expect from students. We do have, those pockets of areas of people where we know that, this is a Spanish speaking population in this area here. And what can we do to get them more in tune with what's going on the buses. And we also have another little program that we just that we're almost ready to implement, where we've got, instead of, the words in English, we've got pictures of stuff like wear your seatbelt, a picture of a kid with a seatbelt on, or got his hands out the windows, and there's, an X, just in case you might not know the language, but you can tell from the picture what we desire and what we don't desire. So we're in the process of getting those printed and put on the buses, so that for those populations that's not going to understand exactly what we're saying, hopefully those pictures will indicate what we need from you, and hopefully you'll comply from there.
Do you have seatbelts on all your school buses?
We have about 280 of our buses out of 600 have seatbelts. So as we slowly replace them, the new buses come in with seatbelts, and I think we're the only ones in Virginia that require seatbelts as our new buses come in. So we've implemented that policy. For right now, it's just if you have a seatbelt on your bus and you're in elementary school, you're required to wear that seatbelt. We'll work on the middle schooler and high schoolers later, but right now, the little ones are the ones that are up and out of their seat and falling out of their seat and doing things like that.
How do you enforce the usage?
Oh, that's part of the discipline policy. So, if you're riding in a car, which so many parents have always said, you're riding in a car, you got to wear a seatbelt. This should be second nature. You get on the school bus now, put your seatbelt on.
Yep.
It should be second nature.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's part of the process. If the first time you get a warning, second time your parents are notified, and you can't wear it, you're not going to ride the bus.
What do you see, or what do your drivers see in terms of student behavior? Do you see improvements on those elementary runs? I mean, you're driving some of these routes. I don't know if you're driving the elementary schools per se.
Yep.
But what's the feedback?
I can tell from the buses that have it versus those that don't. You can see the kids out of their seat a lot more, the elementary students out of their seats a lot more, as opposed to the bigger buses, the newer buses that have the seatbelts. You don't see heads. You can look down the back of the bus and everybody's seated in their seats, so you don't even know if anybody's on there outside of those bigger kids that their heads are above the seat, which is what you want. We were unfortunate. We had an accident earlier this year where a car hit a school bus, and one of the kids that were in the front seat, she had her seatbelt on, and as soon as the accident occurred, and she said, "That's why we have seatbelts." It's like, oh, that's great. We can use that as something that we can show parents that wonder why we don't, but we do have seatbelts on them. That this child was fortunate, and she knew immediately that seatbelt saved her from falling out of the seat or something happening. Granted, with compartmentalization, she would have been okay, but the seatbelt certainly kept her in the seat.
Yeah. Did you get did you see any pushback from drivers, or do you still see any in terms of, well, something just happened in Ohio, and there's been a few crashes in Ohio recently, but one of them prompted this governor's safety group to meet and talk about seatbelts as well as other things. They didn't end up recommending that a law be passed on seatbelts. But one of the fears that I hear often, I heard it several times in this working group, was from drivers fearing, oh, what if there's a fire? What if we flip over and we're in water? And how am I going to get all these kids off? Did you encounter any of that same sentiment? What do you guys do in terms of training?
Yep, we didn't. We didn't get any pushback from it, and they had already started bringing seatbelts on when I got here. But we just now started enforcing it because if obviously 10 buses have seatbelts, that's not really a big deal to discuss with anybody. But now that we're almost halfway through the fleet, we decided to go ahead and start it. But I think the biggest thing is if you're wearing them in a car or in any other kind of means that the same thing is the question is going to happen. What if I get into an accident where the car flips over? Well, I know that on a school bus, from the accidents that I've seen, those without the seat belts, they're thrown everywhere. And would you want to know where they are on that school bus, still in their seat or slammed up against something, or possibly being, ejected out a window or something when the doors are open or the windows break? And I think that most parents are going to prefer that their kids be buckled in, just as in a car, because yes, in a car, if you ran into the water with it, it's still going to happen. You're still going to be in at that point of what are you going to do? So we've got the seatbelt cutters on there, and we're just hoping that nothing ever gets that dire where we have to cut the seatbelts to get everybody off the bus. But I think that right now, the best thing to do is have them in a seatbelt and hope that we never have to be in an emergency situation to have to cut those seatbelts out.
Okay. In terms of technology, I know that like a lot of transporters, Henrico is using Wi-Fi in terms of data, right? Or video or whatnot, pushing data, footage, whatnot, back and forth from the bus to the department. I know that with the federal E-rate program now, there's some interest in Henrico about expanding Wi-Fi to actually address students on longer routes, that whole extension of the classroom, which we know school buses are, but now that the feds have said yes, and they're really backing this concept of school buses as a extension of the classroom. Tell us more about what some of your thoughts are, plans are for introducing Wi-Fi for students.
Well, I know that we did I believe it's the 470 where we put out the application for the RFP. I think that is out, so we'll be waiting on people to apply for or vendors to apply for that, so that we can see who's what the competition is and go from there. But we certainly are going to come one way or the other. We were going to go ahead and do it. But, as we were looking at Wi-Fi on the school buses and everything, we were looking at with our camera systems, we've updated about 150 of our camera systems where we can do live viewing on the school buses. One more means of being able to manage the school bus immediately, as opposed to having to send somebody out to retrieve the data and could bring it back in, download it, all that stuff. That's just a time-consuming effort for staff that we're always understaffed in. But those buses, they have the Wi-Fi capability, and we tested it with a vendor, and we decided to proceed with it. So we were going to go with it without the funding, but the funding will help us to get maybe more of them on school buses, because we have about 60 to 70 buses that are doing those extra long runs. And we'll assess to see how much students use it, to see if we'll put it on more school buses, to see if that's going to help students on their trip in and from school, because we could use it for those that are going to field trips after school, the athletics. I mean, they could. I doubt they would want to, but I'm sure some students would want to be doing some of their homework while they're riding to the neighboring school or whatever. So it's going to be something that it'll be an option for them.
Okay. And so that technology, you had mentioned student ridership verification. I always like to kind of use that term, because I know tracking sometimes has some parents or school boards at least get a little anxious. Real quickly, what are some of the other technology innovations that you're looking to implement there in Henrico?
So we certainly started the student verification, and then that was, a thing that I saw and have always seen is, I look at a student roster for the bus, and it's got 80 kids on there. Obviously, we know only 71 are going to fit on there, but why are we overloaded? Well, because we know half of them aren't going to ride, or whatever that number is for that area. And we wanted to be a little more precise with that number, so that during this shortage of drivers, we can load these buses to an amount of being more students on the bus without having to guess. And when we're short on drivers and we're trying to maximize the ridership, That's what we're looking to do, to make sure that we have the right numbers and everything, that it's a lot closer, so that when we are looking towards next year, when we're asking, parents to sign up, only if you're going to ride the bus, not in case your car is broken down and your husband's car is broken down and your grandmama's car is broken down. Yes, I might need the bus. In reality, you don't need the bus. So you're taking a space that somebody that does use it needs it. So that's what one thing that we're certainly looking forward to. And like I said, all the additions to the tablet are big things, because everything that a bus can do, I certainly want it on the bus. So our buses are, loaded with everything that we can possibly put on there. The AC, all of our new buses come with AC, obviously with seat belts, the tablet, everything that we can possibly do to make the driver comfortable, as well as any aid to get them from A to B and get students from home to school and school to home.
Yep. Great. And safely. Well, Jim, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and looking forward to getting you out to one of the conferences this summer. So we're going to talk, and all you out there in the nation, you can learn more about, of course, our upcoming conferences at stnexpo.com. Jim, again, appreciate you and your team and everything you do for the industry and for everything you do for STN as well.
All right. Thanks, Ryan, for having me.
Absolutely. And we'll let you get out there. I know you might hear some ambient noise there. So Jim actually joined us from the cafeteria because they're doing some professional development and working with employees. So I'll let you get back to it there.
Right.
Thanks again, Jim.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks again to Jim Ellis, as well as Taylor and Wayne Reese, for a great conversation in this week's episode. We also appreciate our sponsors, TransFinder and Zoom. Also want to remind you all, the STN Expos are coming up quick. STN Expo Indy, we have an early bird deadline, March 1st, which is a matter of like a day or so. So get on it. Also, nominate a Garage Star. That feature is back, coming in August in the magazine. You can go to stnonline.com/go/G as in garage, S as in star, to nominate your maintenance professional. As always, visit stnonline.com for all the news and analysis going on in the school transportation industry, and subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you consume your pods to get each new weekly episode of The Nation. Thanks, everyone, and we'll talk to you next week.